But when a notorious gang of inmates targets him, assuming he's just another black man in uniform, they have no idea who they've provoked. Jason Thompson, a retired Delta Force commander, walks the familiar corridors of a federal prison, expecting an ordinary day. Calm, trained, and lethal, Jason is ready to turn their assumptions into a harsh lesson in respect. What they thought would be an easy intimidation soon becomes a test of survival, skill, and justice. And the question remains, will they realize too late who they're dealing with? Before we dive into this suspenseful story, drop a comment with your city so we can see how far it reaches. And if you enjoy the video, don't forget to subscribe my channel. Jason Thompson had always considered himself careful, disciplined, and aware of his surroundings, traits honed over years of service in the Delta Force. At 38, he had retired from active duty, but never from vigilance. On a seemingly ordinary morning, he found himself walking down the familiar corridor of the federal prison, where he now worked as a counselor, helping inmates adjust to structured routines. His calm, measured steps mirrored a man at ease, confident in the order around him, unaware that the ordinary day he anticipated would soon become a test of survival and principle. The walls he passed were filled with tension and whispers. Yet, Jason moved as though untouched, his presence steady, commanding quiet respect. Prison life had its rhythms, its predictable flow, and he knew it well. But even in a place governed by rules, assumptions had power. And on this day, those assumptions would collide violently with reality. The morning seemed ordinary at first. Jason greeted familiar inmates, exchanged brief nods with guards, and walked past the cafeteria, where the smell of breakfast lingered. Yet, there was a subtle shift in the atmosphere that he felt without, fully understanding. Eyes followed him with scrutiny sharper than casual curiosity. Conversations hushed at his approach. It wasn't unusual in a correctional environment for new tension to emerge. Still, today it was different, charged with something deeper and more dangerous. Without warning, a group of men, notorious for their violence and influence within the prison, began to circle him. Their eyes, calculating and cold, assessed him as though he were prey. Just another black man in uniform, assumed weak, assumed controllable. Jason's instincts flared, but he did not panic. He moved as he always did, measured, calm, masking the recognition that the balance of power was shifting in ways the rules could not predict. The confrontation escalated with shocking speed. The group closed in, their movements synchronized, testing boundaries, probing for reaction. Jason's mind raced, calculating each step, each angle, each potential escape or response. One of the men lunged, a knife flashing in the morning light, and time seemed to stretch unnaturally. Jason sidestepped, the motion fluid, precise, a result of years of combat training. The assault was not only physical, it was an attack on his dignity, on the assumptions that had framed him as powerless. Each strike he evaded, each subtle counter, was a lesson the attackers did not expect. The man they underestimated was not only skilled, but legendary in ways they could not comprehend. The prison seemed to shrink around them. The hallways, the doors, the windows, all witnesses to a moment, charged with fear, anger, and injustice. Even as the men realized their miscalculation, Jason's presence imposed an undeniable authority that transcended the assumptions of skin, uniform, or circumstance. And yet, as he subdued the initial attackers with a controlled force, more tension rippled outward. Others watched, the stakes higher than anyone could measure. Could the rest of the inmates act on their assumptions, or would they recognize the reality too late? The peak of the encounter struck like a lightning bolt. Jason stood amid the chaos, his pulse steady, eyes sharp, every muscle coiled with controlled power. The aggressors, previously emboldened by prejudice and ignorance, now hesitated, unsure, their earlier confidence shattered. The air was thick with the consequences of misjudgment, the unspoken acknowledgement that the man before them was not as they had assumed. Pain, rage, and fear mixed with awe as Jason maintained restraint, ensuring no permanent harm came to those who had provoked him, yet demonstrating unequivocally that underestimation had a price. The corridor was silent, but electric, each observer frozen in the realization of what had just unfolded. A single movement could reignite violence, yet Jason's composure radiated control, commanding both respect and caution. In that moment, it became undeniable. This was not just a fight over a corridor or an altercation with inmates. It was a confrontation with the assumptions and biases that permeated every layer of their world. And as the adrenaline subsided, a question lingered, invisible but potent. Had anyone truly recognized who Jason Thompson was before it was almost too late? As the echoes of confrontation faded, Jason reflected on what had transpired and its broader implications. He had survived, maintained order, and protected himself without escalating to irreversible violence. But the encounter left a heavy mark. The prejudice he faced, the quick assumptions made about his strength, character, and authority, mirrored injustices faced far beyond these walls. It was a stark reminder that skill, integrity, and experience can be dismissed when society filters perception through bias. Walking back to his office, he considered the countless others, those judged and attacked, not for what they had done, but for who they were presumed to be. Each step was deliberate, carrying the weight of reflection and purpose. He understood that survival in a moment of injustice was not just about defending oneself. It was about witnessing, enduring, and using that experience to illuminate the truths others overlook. And though the corridor had returned to its usual routine, the lesson remained. Assumptions, fear, and prejudice leave scars that reach far beyond the immediate moment, challenging anyone who dares to see the world as it is rather than how it is presumed to be. How many more would face such judgment? And how many more had their courage underestimated? Jason Thompson knew that the fight for recognition, understanding, and justice began with awareness. His story, like countless others, was a call to open eyes, confront prejudice, and demand the dignity every life deserves.